Marvel versus DC, DC versus Marvel. This has been an argument that has been going on since the 60s. Let us discuss this conundrum that is called Marvel versus DC and see if it's even possible to say if there's a clear-cut superior comic book company and comic book characters. Let's be real with D-Real. What up? What up? It's your man D-Real, and edutainment is what I do. And welcome to yet another Be Real with D-Real. I'm that D-Real. No more fooling around. Let's just get straight into it. As a young child, I can remember having arguments with people all the time about who was tougher, Superman or Thor. Who would win a fight between Captain America and Batman? Who is the master of the skies, Hawkman or the Angel? And it just went on and on and on like that. If you were a fan of DC, then you could think of 1,000,001 reasons why DC characters in general were able to best Marvel characters or vice versa. It's an emotional thing. Let's look at it from a couple of different angles. I've tried, let's call this the definitive Marvel versus DC video. I don't know how much it will define, but I'm going to give it my best shot. 40 plus years of comic book reading should help. First of all, when we talk about Marvel versus DC, almost always it boils down to the Avengers versus the Justice League. But what I want to point out first, there are some extremely powerful characters in the DC universe who are not members of the Justice League. Though most of the most powerful members in the DC, most of the most powerful beings in the DC universe are Justice League members, or at one time have been Justice League members or Justice Society members. What I'm getting at is the really super tough, powerful heroes in the DC universe have at one time or another been associated with the Justice League. On the other hand, in Marvel, you have dozens of extremely powerful characters who have never been Avengers. The Silver Surfer, never been an Avenger. Nova, never been an Avenger. And I could go on and name off a good 5 or 10 who have never been Avengers. What I'm getting at is this. When we're trying to decide who's the most powerful, who's the coolest, who's got the best characters, we can't just relegate our search/comparison to the Avengers and the Justice League. There are tons of, and then on top of that, we can't limit our comparison to just heroes. Who's got the most powerful villains? Who's got the dopest villains? I mean, DC boasts a plethora of powerful, I mean, and when I say powerful, I mean power in the terms of power, raw power. I mean, you got folks like Doomsday, you got folks like Bane, you got folks like Black Adam, you got folks like Darkseid. So are we doing a power measurement without including those very powerful and or formidable characters? You know, when we talk about skill, who's the most skilled superhero in either Marvel or DC? And can we make that comparison? Okay, Captain America is a very skilled fighter. The Black Panther is a very skilled fighter. Iron Fist is a very skilled fighter. Shang-Chi is a very skilled fighter. How do they measure up to, say, a Richard Dragon or a Batman or a Nightwing, or even I would even go so far as to say somebody like a Prometheus. Prometheus and the Taskmaster. That would be a very good battle, Marvel DC wise. They both ape their abilities from somewhere else and utilize them to devastating effect. When we're talking about raw power, more often than not, Superman and or the Hulk come up in the conversation. So, who's more powerful? I could sit here and debate it and give you like 100,000 reasons why, but let's just be realistic. Superman is more powerful than the Hulk. I mean, given their history, given Superman's 80 plus years of being around, if there is a character who wears a cape and has tights, he most likely bit his style from Superman. How many superheroes can say they didn't bite their style from Superman? I mean, look at the picture behind me. Look at Thor and look at Superman. Given the aesthetic differences, that's practically the same exact uniform. And if you look around, a lot of these other characters have a similar motif. If you wore tights and a cape, you got the idea from Superman. Okay, so you can't argue with that, Marvel. I mean, there's literally no argument. Who's got the better stories? Who's got more pathos? Who's got more real to life? I can identify with that. That sounds like a very real thing happening in that comic book. That's Marvel. I mean, from drug use to racism to alternative sexuality and lifestyles, Marvel has covered that rather vividly and rather openly. First gay marriage in a comic book. So who's more innovative? Who's more cutting edge? Who's more has their ear to the concrete? They both make great stories, and I have read some amazing DC stories, but overall, I would have to say Marvel makes better stories. Marvel has more open, wide mouth moments. Marvel has more, oh my God, I can't believe that happened type moments. And it's arguable. And please, y'all, bear in mind, this is just my humble opinion. If you disagree, please, by all means, tell me why you disagree and why you think your company is the better company. Personally, I've always been a Marvel fan. Everybody that knows me knows that I'm a Marvel fan. Everybody that knows me knows the Black Panther is far and away my favorite Marvel character, arguably my favorite comic book character. And not just because he's Black. And not just because he has Panther in his name, but because of what he represents and how he represents it. I think more than anything else is why I dig T'Challa so much. But back to this Marvel DC thing. But before we go any further with the Marvel DC thing, I just want to say, comment, like, and subscribe to the Be Real with D Real page so that you can see the new material that I put out. And you won't miss anything cool and nerdy. Now, Marvel has an archer. Who is the greatest archer in all of Marvel Comics? Hawkeye. That's easy. Who is the greatest archer in all of DC Comics? Green Arrow. Easy. Who's the better archer? I've seen Green Arrow do things and that's like, oh, wow, that's amazing. I don't think anybody else could do that with a bow and arrow. But I've seen Hawkeye do it. Hawkeye's been a blind archer and still was a very effective archer. So there you go. Who's the better archer? Depends on who you think has the greater feats. I can sit here all night and say, okay, some of you superheroes in DC are superior to some of you superheroes in Marvel. And that's a fact. It's just a fact. The Flash is faster than Quicksilver. Period. There's really no arguing about that. Unless we go, ultra nerd and go, well, it depends on if he's in the DC universe or if he's in the Marvel universe. Okay. And you have a valid point. Yeah. But overall, if we're talking about in their respective universes, if it was possible for them to run a foot race in their respective universes, but still race each other at the same time, I know that sounds weird, but we're talking comics and fantastic things that happen. The Flash would beat him. The Flash can exceed light speed. I know there have been instances where we've written, I'll say we, but artists have written or writers have written. Artists don't write. Well, some artists do. Stop it. Anyway, some writers have written Quicksilver as being able to exceed the speed of light in some instances. But by and large, if called upon to do it, the Flash can exceed light speeds on the regular. Okay. Villains. Let's talk villains. By and large, I cannot think of a villain any place who exceeds Victor Von Doom. Facts. If you got a doper villain, if you got a cooler villain, if you've got a more successful villain than Victor Von Doom of Latveria, I would love to hear it. But if we're talking villains, there's nobody, in my opinion, nobody in any comic universe that is a doper villain than Dr. Doom. He has mastered science, he has mastered sorcery, and he has held omnipotent power more than one time. So, I mean, help me out here. Who's a doper villain than Dr. Doom? Put it down in the comments, and please don't forget to tell me why. Okay, I get it. And don't tell me another Marvel villain, because it's a Marvel DC comparison. If you know a doper DC villain, that'll narrow it down. No, it won't. I guess what I'm getting at here is when we have this Marvel versus DC conversation and say Marvel is better because, or DC is better because, we can continuously poke holes in one another's theories. Plastic Man there in the background. Plastic Man versus Mr. Fantastic. Who's a better stretcher? Who's a better shapeshifter? Who's smarter? Who's got cooler allies? Who's got better who's got better fighting techniques? You know what I'm saying? Those kinds of things. So when we ask who's better, talk to me about criteria. What are we talking about here? If we're talking like from like a power set standpoint, then we got to go with the 5 main power sets. What are the 5 main power sets, you might ask? Okay, I take my iteration of power sets from a game back in the early 2000s called City of Heroes. City of Heroes was a game where you could create your own hero and go in these open world adventures and do all kinds of things. But your character had to fall in one of 5 types of categories. You have first, the tank. As the name states, someone who can take a whole bunch of damage. Someone who could stand in front of another not so durable villain and take those lumps, take those blasts, take those hits so that no one else has to suffer. That is the primary function of a tank. Excellent examples of tanks include Superman there in the background. While not as durable as his opponent there, Thor is a pretty good tank. I would think the Incredible Hulk from Marvel would be a better tank, seeing as he can tank more damage. The other category would be the Scrapper. The Scrapper is a character who is just one of raw martial skills, whether that be skills with a sword, whether that be skills with a staff, whether that be skills with their bare hands. That is what a scrapper does. A scrapper goes into the battle and inflicts damage, period. And that is what scrappers do. They fight. They are fighters. That's another word for them. Then you have your controllers. Controllers fall in a wide category of things. Controllers are people who use energy or objects or elements or something to manipulate or control large groups of people. That could be fire. That could be metal. That could be mental powers. That could be plants. Whatever I can take and use to control you or use you to my advantage or to just hold you down so that you can't escape or do any damage to my allies. That is what a controller does. Okay? Then you have a blaster. A blaster is just what the name suggests. While many of these people in the background are in fact blasters along with something else, blasters primarily channel energy, flame, radiation, whatever, from their hands or their eyes to inflict damage. That is essentially what a blaster does. Let me see. I got one more left. Okay. I would say, well, normally in City of Heroes, that last category would be a healer. And from a game standpoint, that's somebody who in the heat of battle can support or assist their fellow heroes by either putting buffs on their powers, amplifying their powers, or putting some sort of protective field or elixir or something on or in them that allows them to move or fight or act at a higher rate than what they normally would. Okay, so those are the 5 categories of superheroes that you have. This is the real suggestion. Get you 5 characters from that category, from each comic book company, the toughest one you think there is, put them in a head-to-head. Now, you could have that head-to-head be each character fight their counterpart, sort of like Marvel versus DC was back in the early 90s. Or you could have entire groups going at each other in sort of a group kind of dynamic, like JLA versus Avengers here back in the early 2000s. And that's where I am. Call it a cop-out, call it what you want to call it, but I guarantee you it's a never-ending battle to try and determine who is the clear-cut superior company. It could be argued that pound for pound, DC characters are far more powerful than their Marvel counterparts. And I will concede that that's true. I mean, on a scale, Superman, in terms of raw power, is far more powerful than Thor, unamplified Thor. Okay? Do what y'all do with it. And you know what? Let me know how it turns out if you want to let me know how it turns out in the comments below. I'd kind of be stoked to see a Hawkman versus Archangel kind of battle. How would Hawkman deal with his ability to shoot those flechettes that paralyze and poison? So interesting. And now that Captain Marvel has been amped to ridiculously OP levels, is she a match for Superman now? Or could her and say someone as equally powerful, say like a Thor or a Sentry, could they take on Superman and take him down? I don't know. Who's the more powerful magic user, Zatanna or the Scarlet Witch? Doctor Strange or Dr. Fate? Depends on what the circumstances are, guys. That's where I'm coming from with it. I'm not going to sit here and try to, say your company is, your company isn't, because there are lots and lots of variables. My conclusion, draw your own. Never had one like that before, have you? Yes, this has been Be Real with D Real. I will be back with another interesting tete-a-tete or just some information that you might find very beneficial as a reader of comics, a nerd of nerdiness, a geek of geekiness. And until then, y'all be good. Be good to each other.